Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Vrayashanarandana Yashodanandana Vrayashanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Vrayashanarandana Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki. Narayanam namaskrityam naran chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato yayan udhirajet Nasta prayesu vadesu nityam bhavata sevaya Bhagavati uttamai sloke bhaktir bhavati naistikim Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 16. So we start new chapter, and we will read text number 1. But there is a description of the chapter, so if you don't mind, I'll read it in order for us to understand what's going on now, that this is a new topic. So we were talking about before the characteristics of pure devotees and Bharata Maharaj and Priyavata descendants, and how the importance of being a devotee as the main qualification for being recognized in the history, in the Bhagavatam. To be in the pages of Bhagavatam, you need to be qualified. And we were reading about different kings, but they weren't ordinary kings. The main quality that they've been was they were pure devotees. So that was very important topic to learn from, to study. And now we change a little bit the mood of the Bhagavatam. It's a description of the Jambudvip. It's a bit dense and sometimes even difficult chapter to study. Well, actually, from here onwards, the fifth canto Bhagavatam will talk about the description of the universe, the geographic aspects, and details that are sometimes beyond our capacity to understand. So now we will start with the description of Jambudvip. While describing the character of Maharaj Priyavrata and his descendants, Sukadev Goswami also described Meru mountain and the planetary system known as Bhumandal. Bhumandal is like a lotus flower, and its 7 islands are compared to the world of the lotus. The place known as Jambudvip is in the middle of that world. In Jambudvip, there is a mountain known as Sumeru, which is made of solid gold. The height of this mountain is 84,000 yojanas, and which is 16 yojanas are the below, 16,000 yojanas are below the earth. Its width is estimated to be 32,000 yojanas at its summit, and 60,000 yojanas at its foot. So it's inverse. So usually we see that the mountains generally goes from the width part, and then goes up. But in this case, it's downwards. 32,000 yojanas on the top and going down to 16,000. 1 yojana equals approximately to 8 miles. The king of the mountain, Sumeru, is the support of the planet Earth. So it's in the middle of the Earth. Yeah. On the southern side of the land known as Ilavita Varshan are the mountains known as Himava, Hemakuta, and Nisada. And on the northern side of the mountains are the mountains Nila, Sweta, and Sringa. Similarly, on the eastern and western side, there are Malayan and Gandhamadana. 2 large mountains surrounding Sumeru mountains are 4 mountains known as Mandara, Mesumandara, Suparsva, and Kumuda, each 10,000 yojanas long and 10,000 yojanas high. Of these 4 mountains, there are 3 trees 1,100 yojanas high: a mango tree, a rose apple tree, a kadamba tree, a banyan tree. There are also lakes full of milk, honey, sugarcane juice, and pure water. These lakes can fulfill all desires. There are also gardens named Nandana, Chitrarata, Vaibrajaka, and Sarvatobhadra. On the side of Suparva mountain is a kadamba tree with streams of honey flowing from its hollows. And on Kumuda mountain there is a banyan tree named Satavalsa, from whose roots flow rivers containing milk, yogurt, and many other desirable things. Surrounding Sumeru mountain, like the filaments of the world of the lotus, are 20 mountains range, such as Kuganda, Kurara, Kusumba, Vaikanka, and Trikuta. To the east of the Sumeru are the mountains Jatara, Devakuta. To the west are Pavana and Pariyatra. To the south are Kailasa and Karavira, and to the north are Trisringa and Makara. These 8 mountains are about 80,000 yojanas long, 2,000 yojanas wide, and 2,000 yojanas high. On the summit of the Sumeru mountain is Brahmapuri, the residence of Lord Brahma. Each of its 4 sides is 10,000 yojanas long. Surrounding Brahmapura are the cities of King Indra and 7 other demigods. These cities are 1/4 of the size of Brahmapuri. Okay, this is the description that we are about to, this chapter that we are about to read, to study, and following also more descriptions in details about Jambudvip. So now we start with text number 1. It's a prose. So I'll read it, and I'll request you, please, if you can repeat word by word and the meaning. Text 1. Raya vacha utastvaya bhumandala yama vishesho java adityas tapatiyatra chaso yotishan ganais chandrama vasaha drisyate. Translation word by word. If you can repeat, please. Raya Vacha. Maharaj Parikshit said. Uta, already been said. Tvaya, by you. Bhumandala, or the planetary system known as Bhumandala. Ajama Vishesha, the specific length of the radius. Javad, as far as. Aditya, the sun. Tapati, heats. Yatra, wherever. Cha, also. Aso, that. Yotisham, of the luminaries. Ganai, with hearts. Chandrama, the moon. Va, either. Saha, with. Drisyate, is seen. Translation. King Parikshit said to Sukadeva Goswami, O Brahmana, you have already informed me that the radius of Bhumandal extends as far as the sun spreads its light and heat, as far as the moon and all the stars can be seen. Purport. In this universe, it is stated that the planetary system known as Bhumandal extends to the limits of the sunshine. According to the modern science, the sunshine reaches Earth from a distance of 93 million miles. If we calculate according to this modern information, 93 million miles can be considered the radius of Bhumandal. In the Gayatri mantra, we chant Om Bhur Bhubha Swaha. The word Bhur refers to Bhumandal. Tat Savitur Varinya, the sunshine is spread throughout Bhumandal. Therefore, the sun is worshipable. The stars, which are known as nakshatras, are not different suns, as modern astronomers supposed. From Bhagavad Gita 10:21, we understand that the stars are similar to the moon. Nakshatran aham shashi. Like the moon, the stars reflects the sunshine. Apart from our modern distinguished estimations of where the planetary systems are located, we can understand that the sky and its various planets were studied long before Śrīmad Bhāgavatam was compiled. Sukadeva Goswami explained the location of the planets, and this indicates that the information was known long before Sukadeva Goswami related it to Maharaj Parikshit. The location of the various planetary systems was not unknown to the sages who flourished in the Vedic age. Anangyanatilandasya Gyanangyana Salakajan Chakshurulumitanjena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Mukankaroti Vatsalam Vangung Lagan Jate Girim Jat Kripatamaham Bande Sri Gurun Dinacharinam Paramananda Vardhanan Sri Chaitanya Ishvaram Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami iti namine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity to glorify Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, and it's an humble attempt to serve you all by sharing some little realizations, whatever we can understand. But also mainly it's an opportunity to get purification. As probably most of you know, we have different ways to perform devotional service, and kirtanan, reciting Bhagavatam, holy names, is one of the most effective ways of purification. So at the end, this is also for my personal purification, and so I'm grateful to you all. And also requesting your blessings so I can be able to perform this service in respectful manner. Thank you. So this point, as we mentioned before, is a little bit different than what we were studying in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. And for many devotees or many people, it's kind of complex, difficult to understand. In my case, it's difficult to understand. So I was thinking how we can present at this point, this topic, and at the end, what is the purpose actually of this talking about these descriptions can be a little bit confusing because we want to hear more about Krishna and his activities and pastime. We are more attracted to that. So, and studying the material creation, the geography, and the way how it's described is complex because if we understand our conditioning, who we are in this human body, our ability of perception is three-dimensional. And these descriptions that we are about to learn, to read, it's multidimensional. So it's difficult to match this multidimensional aspect descriptions, realms, with three-dimensional capacity of perception. So it's difficult, doesn't go together. So it's a compare like a little ant trying to understand the whole building. So if we acknowledge that reality, what is our conditioning, so our approach to these topics will be more humble. So we won't attend to understand this by our own means, because it's impossible. Considering that our means are limited. We know that we have 4 defects in our conditional state. So perhaps you can help me to remember what are those 4 conditioning. Do you know? Do you remember? Do you know any? That's right. Our senses are imperfect, and for them, we have the tendency to commit mistakes, and that means also we are in illusion. And unfortunately, because of these 3, we have the tendency to cheat. So with that, we can see, for example, those who, if we try to understand this topic with these conditions, with these limitations, whatever we can have will be illusion, and if we spread that so-called understanding would be cheating, yeah? So it said that these 3 conditionings that we have, we cannot do anything about it because it was imposed on us due to our past activities. But we have certain control about cheating. So we have to be more mindful about it, especially if we are practitioners of this spiritual process. So trying to practice truth, it's one of the main principles of our pillars of a spiritual practice. Well, with this point, if we wonder why, so then we study these difficult topics that we are not able to grab because we are limited. And Parikshit Maharaj himself is asking Sukadeva Goswami to describe more about these topics. We understand that Parikshit Maharaj is not ordinary devotee, it's a pure devotee. And so a pure devotee asking more details about this creation has a purpose. He said, if we read the subsequent text, he expressed himself that he remembers how Sukadeva Goswami in previous chapter described how Priyavrata Maharaj created or divided the Bhumandal. But now it was a generical description, but now he wants more details. But why? And in the 3rd chapter, if I'm not wrong, he expressed why. Because if we understand how Krishna is present in his creation through his energies, we will be able to understand more Krishna, relate more Krishna, and interact with him in a better manner. So, related to that point, I found quite interesting Bhaktivedanta purpose in Bhagavad Gita when Prabhupada expressed why it's important for us to study these complex chapters or complex topics. This is the purpose of the text 7, chapter 10, Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada said, the highest summit of spiritual perfection is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is firmly convinced of the different opulence of the Supreme Lord, he cannot engage in devotional service. That's quite an important point. Unless we are not firmly convinced of the different opulence of the Supreme Lord, we cannot engage in devotional service. Generally, people know that God is great, but they do not know in details how God is great. Here are details. If one knows factually how God is great, then naturally he becomes a surrendered soul and engaged himself in devotional service of the Lord. When one factually knows the opulence of the Supreme Lord, the opulence of the Supreme, there is no alternative but to surrender to him. This factual knowledge can be known from the description of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam and Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures. Then furthermore, Prabhupada explains, he said, there are some opulences of the Supreme Lord. When one is firmly convinced of them, he accepts Krishna with great faith and without any doubt, and he engaged in devotional service. All this particular knowledge is required in order to increase one's intense interest in loving devotional service to the Lord. So this is quite important point too. I'll repeat. All this particular knowledge is required in order to increase one's interest in the loving devotional service to the Lord. One should not neglect to understand fully how great Krishna is. For by knowing the greatness of Krishna, one will be able to be fixed in sincere devotional service. So I found quite important this detail, and also motivational also for us to prepare our consciousness, our attitude, how we can approach these difficult topics of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. It has a purpose to understand the greatness of God, so will enable us to develop proper attitude, be submissive, and also at the same time increase our desire to be engaged in devotional service. So that's one purpose why these descriptions are in detail described here in Bhagavatam, to help us to understand how Krishna is present in his creation through his opulences, through his energies. And also, Parikshit Maharaj explained that by understanding the presence of the Lord, we appreciate this universal form. We learn how to interact with that form of the Lord, but also at the same time purify our consciousness. But there are requirements for understanding this universal form. So you probably can remember what is the instruction of Krishna given to Arjuna in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is requesting Krishna, please show me your universal form. So and Krishna says, well, I'll show you, but there is a requirement for that. With your conditional state right now, your actual situation, your two eyes, you are not able to see this universal form. So that we can extrapolate to our reality, we cannot see. But we are in interaction with that universal form because it's the most close form of the Lord. Well, we interact with this form that is closest to us. We have the deities, we have Krishna's presence, so spiritual form is beyond our understanding, but the universal form, through the nature, we have different or direct experience of this aspect of God, but we are not able to understand fully. So Krishna tells to Arjuna, I'll help you to see this form, so I'll give you the ability to see that. I specialize. So Krishna gave that blessing, so that empower Arjuna to see the universal form. And it was so overwhelming for him, even with the influence of Krishna, or with the help of Krishna, Arjuna wasn't able to grab hold this universal form and be peaceful in heart. He was quite overwhelmed and immediately requested Krishna, please, disappear that form and come back to me with your two arms form and my love close to my heart. But the point basically is that we cannot understand these descriptions of the universal form, given that here in the Bhagavatam by our own means, it's Krishna who is giving us the ability to understand. But also, Krishna provides different means for that. It's not just him directly giving us the ability, revealing himself, but also he gives us different means for that. And if you, for example, again, back to Bhagavad Gita, if you remember what is the first or main instructions that Krishna gives to Arjuna to understand the absolute truth, and it's also it's the first regulation in devotional service, what we should do as a sincere practitioners of a spiritual process. Do you know what is the main requirement, or the first one that we should do? Pardon me? Being non-envious. Can be, yeah, but it's something, a requirement very important for us. Because without that we cannot progress in our spiritual life. Complete shelter of Krishna. Yes, there is a way to do that. Because directly we cannot do it. We do through a spiritual master. That's the point. The first instruction of the Nectar of Devotion, for example, is to accept a spiritual master. And that is the way how Krishna also instructed in Bhagavad Gita. Do you remember what is the text for that? 434. Tatvidi pranipachena pranipashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnana jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Because if we approach to the seers, those who have seen the absolute truth, they will able to reveal us. But for that we have to do it in a proper mood. We have to approach submissively, asking questions and rendering service. So it's the same point is repeated here. It's not by our own qualification that we can learn about these transcendental topics. It has to be through different mediums that Krishna himself organized, directly himself, or he sends some mediums, agents for us. Okay, so that point is very important to understand. And one of the things that, for example, here, in also Bhagavatam, especially Bhagavatam in the 12 cantos, we know that we heard many times that there are 10 topics that the Bhagavatam is describing in the chapter 2, in the canto, second canto, chapter 10, text 1. Sukadeva Goswami mentioned about the 10 topics. Do you remember those 10 topics? Visarga, Visarga, Stanam, Poshanam, Uttiyan, Manvantara, Ishanukata, Nirodha, Mukti, and Ashraya. Yes, that's right. So those are the 10 topics that Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is describing in details in different ways. According to Jiva Goswami, in the Tattva Sandarbha, there are descriptions about how this is organized. Generally, for example, Siddhar Swami in commentaries of the Tattva Sandarbha said that all the chapters, all the cantos of Bhagavatam describe directly and indirectly about these 10 topics. But some cantos emphasize more in specific topics. So in that way, for example, but why these points are there? But because we want to know more about Krishna, but we require there are prerequisites for that. In order to get qualified, we need to understand the different ways how Krishna is manifested, his energies, and these 10 topics. It's a means for us to become qualified in that way and eventually understand the summum bonum, Krishna himself. So, for example, about the creation, it's more described, Swarga is more described in the 3rd canto. And this is starting from Sukadeva Goswami, because Sukadeva Goswami start talking Bhagavatam from the 3rd canto onwards. And he starts from Swarga, the description of the creation, how Krishna creates. So that is third canto. But then Visarga is also described in the third canto, a little bit of the third canto, second half, fourth canto, and also in the first canto, first part of the fifth canto. We also, with Priyavrata Maharaj, or description of the Visarga. Then we have Sthanan, that is specific, this part of the Bhagavatam, how all the living entities are placed in different planetary systems according to their levels of consciousness, and how the bodies or the forms of living entities have been created based in the desire of the living entities. It said that Brahma didn't create the bodies until the desire of the living entity was manifested. So he has to create the bodies that match according to the desire of the living entity. So the 8,004,000 forms of life are based in our type of desires that we have. And this number is based on the three modes of nature, the combination of three modes of nature that we all are influenced by. And so how the combination is these modes also create the influence or the type of consciousness and desires that we have. And we acquire bodies based on that. So this is Sthana, and it's described in this second part of the second half of this fifth canto. Then we have Poshana, is protection, the special protection that Krishna gives to his devotees. In details, it's more emphasized in the sixth canto, when Krishna expresses or manifests different forms, how he protects his devotees according, again, their level of consciousness. And the seventh canto is described more about Uti, the impetus of creation based in the tendencies of us, the inclination of us to act. And so our activities are classified into two levels. Do you know which are those two levels? So two categories of activities that we perform based on our consciousness. It's activities which are auspicious and non-auspicious. Just two different varieties of activities. So again, based in our level of consciousness. And it's also in the seventh canto is described Varnashram and Dharma. Because of that, our proclivity to act according to our level of consciousness, how the modes of nature are influenced on has the influence on us. So we have also the social order based in these three modes of nature and the influence upon us. Then we have Manvantara Avatar, or Manvantara, that the topic it's more described in the eighth canto. And quite important this point, because it said that when Brahma, who is the secondary creator of the universe, when he wants to interact with Krishna, he cannot do it personally, directly. What he does is that he goes to the shore of the Milk Ocean, and he has to sit there and meditate. And by meditation, Krishna reveals him what he has to do, what is the problem, the solutions, and everything. That's the way how Brahma, he interacts with Krishna. But with the Manus, it's quite important how Krishna interacts in different way. Because the function of the Manus is to establish the spiritual principles for the living entities to gradually elevate their consciousness. So for Krishna, that's very important task. So he tried to directly intervene in that way because it's for our benefit. For us, we need to establish or to follow established spiritual principles, authorized. So Krishna, it's acting directly and indirectly in that process through the Manus, and also when he incarnates during the period of the Manus. Krishna has taken different incarnations And in this way, he helped to the establishment of new spiritual principles for our benefit. So it's very dear to Krishna, this point, for our benefit, because he is very much concerned how to help us to come out from this state of conditioning. And then we have Ishanukata, that is more described in the 9th canto of Bhagavatam, different incarnations of the Lord. And then Mukti. Mukti is described in the 11th canto. But also it's important point to understand what actually means Mukti. According Lord Chaitanya, for example, Mukti means give up all material desires, all denominations, upadhis, and revive our internal consciousness, revive our position, constitutional position, means being engaged in devotional service. So Lord Chaitanya in the Shikshastaka gave us one text or one verse that is describing this mood. Nayananda Yananda Sundarin Kavitan Jagadisha Kamaje Mama Jamani Jamanishvara Bhakti Tahito Kintoje. So I have no desire to accumulate wealth. I have no desire for followers, no beautiful women, and my only desire is to be engaged in devotional service, have your devotional service, birth after birth. So even that, it doesn't mean that a devotee doesn't even ask going to the spiritual world. For a devotee, it's more important, or the real liberation is to be in association of devotees and be engaged in devotional service. So I was thinking, wow, this is an interesting point, because somehow or another here we are among devotees, and we have the opportunity also to be engaged in devotional service. So that means we are in that platform of real mukti, but I guess the difference is because our level of consciousness, if we are really aware of that and taking advantage of this opportunity that we have. So it's another topic, that different type of devotional service and all those factors. But I just mentioned this point for us to meditate a little bit more how fortunate we are and what we should do with that, because we have all the means, and so what we are doing with it. Then the last point is Asraya, is the supreme shelter, Krishna. Krishna's activities, Krishna's pastimes. Quite interesting how the Bhagavatam is organized, because we have 18,000 verses, 335 chapters, and 1/3 of all that is only dedicated to Krishna, the supreme, his original form, Krishna's pastime activities. 1/3 of all that information. So in that way we can understand that all 9 different topics are connected with this main topic. So for us to understand this different topic, it's to help us to connect with this main point that is clearly emphasized in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. As we said, it's 1/3 of whole Bhagavatam, and the 10th canto, specifically the 10th canto, 90 chapters just for this topic. And also we have part of the 1st canto, activities of Krishna, and the 11th canto as well. So that's another way to understand a bit more why the structures of these topics, or the description of these sometimes difficult or challenging topics in the Bhagavatam, for us to understand more the presence of Krishna in his different energies, and all for our benefit. And also another interesting point, perhaps it will help us to see how this structure, or why these topics are presented in this manner, is Because as initially we mentioned, in our conditional state, three-dimensional perception, ability of perceive or interact with the nature through three-dimensional ability. So we require the interaction with the most gross aspect of the energy of the Lord. That means the material nature. That's at first level of understanding of the absolute truth. So we know that absolute truth has three levels. We remember that? Yeah? The first one is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. That's right. So in that way, for example, by studying this universal form, the interaction of nature Bhagavatam in the first canto mainly is also teaching us how we should learn or interact with this Brahman aspect of the Lord. So in that way, get the purification and being able then after reach the second level, understanding how Krishna is present in this universe through the localized aspect, Paramatma. Because it said that all these energies of this material creation, material elements, they cannot be active if Krishna is not present there. And he is present there through the medium of Paramatma, his localized aspect. By realizing that we will be able to interact with Krishna in more holistic way and enable us to reach the topmost understanding about Bhagavan aspect of the Lord. So this is nicely organized in Bhagavatam. In this aspect, for example, there is one story that perhaps you heard before. It's Nasruddin. Have you heard about this Nasruddin? It's a famous philosopher, but a very wise and sane person. He said that he was lying down kind of sleeping, and his feet were more in direction to the Mecca. And one Sufi person around, he said, "Hey, Nasruddin, what are you doing? Don't show your feet to the Mecca." So, and here he wake up. "Oh, so sorry, I didn't wanted to do it, but please tell me where is not God, so I can put my feet there." So, you understand what is the idea? It's basically, if we understand how Krishna is present in his creation, we have to learn that he is everywhere, and we can learn to interact with him, and that's why he is everywhere, and in different ways, through his energies, through his personal presence as well. We have the deities here, we have the holy name, we have the material nature in sin, and different incarnations. And I can't remember where specifically is described when it said that Krishna takes different forms as the number of different forms of living lives are. So different incarnations, and his incarnations are like waves of the ocean, unlimited. And the only purpose of that is to help us to come out from this conditional state, to go back to our constitutional position in loving service to him and be happy. So this is almost the end of my presentation, but a little bit more, if you allow me to share some tips that I was reading. How Sudhaputra Prabhu presented some analogies for us helping us to understand what is coming. Because as we mentioned before, it's very complex. He said to understand these topics about especially the cosmology or the geography of the universe, and especially this description of the Jambudvip Bhumanda, we can understand that it's a description of a cubit with different faces, different sizes. It's one thing with different sizes, different perspectives. So sometimes we can read a perspective from this side, and can be so confusing when another description comes from the other side, but it's the same thing. So if we understand this presentation comes from different perspectives of the same thing, different angles of perception, so with that approach, we will be able to digest a little bit more what we are reading. Another analogy that he said is that it's like a painting, a canvas, where, for example, is described different scenes of the person. For example, a personality is doing different things. So in this part of the painting is doing maybe sleeping, and another is walking or talking with somebody, but it's the same person, different activities. And we have that experience to see different paintings when, for example, we see Krishna's pastimes, sometimes painting that describing Goloka Vrindavan and material world and things, different activities of Krishna's different, the dancer Ras when he's dancing with different girls in different positions at the same time. So the same way, if we have that approach for reading this part of this complex description of Bhagavatam, we will be able to a little bit grasp what's going on there. Okay, so just sharing these tips. Hopefully it will be useful for you and for me as well. So I'll stop here. If you have any questions, comments, especially comments, I will appreciate, because this is important topic. You have any? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. When you were giving the class, I was remembering one story. गालिब शराब पीना दे मंदिर में बैठकर, या वह जगह दिखा दे जहाँ पर खुदा ना हो. The meaning is that a person somebody wanted to drink wine. So he is asking the in charge in the mosque, Mohammedan mosque.
Yeah.
So he is asking, please show me a place where there is no God.
Yeah.
So why can't I drink in the mosque?
Interesting.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Good saying. Thank you for that, Prabhu. You have another question, Prabhu?
I had one question. So some devotees, let's say some devotees, they explained to me that actually when it has those descriptions in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, not all of them are literal. For example, when it says Mount Meru is like a golden mountain which is upside down, then for example it could be like, if you look at stars from a far distance and they're very close to each other and they go up in a spiral, then you could say, oh, it looks like a golden mountain. Or when it says there's an ocean of milk, it doesn't mean it's milk, it means it's because milk is very precious liquid, so then it means there's some very precious liquid. So what's your point of view?
Well, actually, as initially we said, this is a description of multidimensional aspect. We are not able to understand really. But the Bhagavatam is also, I think, Swami as well, where he explains, Bhagavatam has different language. This is described in different aspects for different level of consciousness. And we can take the meaning of the Bhagavatam literally in many aspects, in whole aspect, because it's true. And also it has hidden aspects as well. For that require the help of acharyas to reveal that knowledge and enable us to understand. So in our case, as followers of our Sampradaya of Prabhupada, for example, we understand the Bhagavatam, whatever is described is as it is. It's and if we try to interpret it like that, it's because it's our mental concoctions. It has to have a reference. That's my humble understanding. Anything else? Well, if you're... today is also Founder-Acharya Ekadasi, important day. For those who perhaps are not familiar what actually this means, for us as spiritual practitioners, we have, under the guidance already of Lord Chaitanya and our Sampradaya, we are requested to follow some kind of austerities, so-called austerities, like a fasting, for example, twice a month in the Ekadasi days, as a means for us to offer loving sacrifice to the Lord and be engaged more in devotional service. Every Ekadasi, the sacrifice that we do is fasting from grains, and be utilized more our time consciously and be engaged more in spiritual practices. But in Founder-Acharya Ekadasi, it's more, it has a special consideration in the sense that it is related to the Pandavas, especially Bhima, who wasn't able to follow this prescription, the fasting, because of his bodily constitution, fire in the stomach. For him, fasting was very difficult. But he was concerned because he wanted to follow this principle, because his brothers and mother, they all very faithfully follow the Ekadasis. And so he approached to Vyasadeva and said, please help me, guide me, what should I do? I cannot fast, I want to say 2 days in a month. But Vyasadeva was emphasizing, well, fasting is important, you should do it. And he again said, well, I can't, it's very difficult for me. So Vyasadeva revealed to him a special concession. He said that if you fast in a specific Ekadasi, like today, Founder-Acharya Ekadasi is known for that, you will get the benefit of fasting all the 24 Ekadasis of the year, but it has to be even with water. It's not just grain, but water. So in that way, you will receive all the benefits in this fasting. So why we talk today about that is because it's an opportunity for us to consciously offer a little bit of sacrifice for the pleasure of the Lord mainly. Because we are not trying to get the benefit of the Ekadasis as described in the Mahatmyas, and the benefit of Ekadasis, and you get that such and such blessings. But mainly for us as spiritual practitioners is the opportunity to be more engaged in devotional service for the pleasure of the Lord. And also it's a win-win situation because fasting helps to the condition, has health properties. For the body is too much, I guess, because if we are not so much controlling our eating habits, the body needs some rest. So by fasting, we are giving the body the opportunity to restore and heal. So it has many benefits as well. But as a spiritual practitioner, for us today, for example, it's another opportunity to consciously offer something to the Lord and be engaged more in devotional service at the level of our capacity. So that was the note that I wanted to mention about Founder-Acharya Ekadasi. So if you don't have any more comments and questions, I'll end that here. Thank you so much. Granted Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Jai Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaura Premanandi, Hare.